Alright, hello everybody. My name is Philip Crawford. I'm going to run you through one of my articles for my research paper on Mars and habitation, more like Mars colonization in the event that we need a second planet after Earth to colonize. Let me go ahead and take you into my article. The title here is Destination Mars, Colonization via Initial One-Way Missions. Now, the first point I wanted to bring up here is how the abstract does a wonderful job accomplishing two goals. First, to convince the reader that there is a problem to solve, being the survival of our race, kind of a big issue. And second, the overview of their suggested solution, which is even further explained for the reader in concision, but still with a little more detail here in the introduction, talking about how the DARPA program is the project kind of formed that really started this question of trying to find another planet to inhabit, and how it leads into the talk about how Mars is a good option and some of the variables we're going to need to factor in here for its colonization. I put here at the end of the introduction that it's very typical practice in papers on science and engineering listing all possible outcomes and expected results, which allows for both researchers and onlookers to keep the end goal in mind. I was going to say that's pretty indicative of most abstracts and papers in the scholarly fields, but just particular to engineering and science papers, it's kind of a common practice to make sure that people reading and people trying to imitate a goal know all the variables ahead of time. Coming down here, we are talking about how the infrequent inclusion of measurements and numbered quantities is also very indicative of an engineering article. Very true, particularly when you have to have specific measurements to recount an experiment or figure out the good distance for your own research. Yeah, very, very common practice for engineering articles. Goes more into that on distance here. And then down here, I have that this article does a very good job factoring in all known variables for the equation of finding other suitable planets. It's very quintessential for people reading the article that want all the pieces to the puzzle they need to solve. Moving right along here. Down here, when it talks about resources, the article also maps out all possible outcomes for each suggested practice, going through a hypothetical situation of how Martian inhabitants would go about populating the atmosphere with oxygen. This is very typical of engineering articles, and it also gives us a unique insight as the reader on some of the practices that this article is inspiring, and hopefully we'll see through the success of this mission. Coming on down here, we have one in the ethical considerations. This kind of surprised me, as it is probably unique to this article, maybe a couple others. Ethical standpoints being analyzed is not usually indicative of an engineering journal, and it's usually just trying to crunch numbers and figure out how to solve problems. Yeah, ethics is not typically included. And on top of that, using historical references to solidify the reasoning is also rather uncommon, at least in the engineering articles that I've read, and I think it's very, very helpful for this paper. Coming down here, this talks about how if we were to find planets other than Mars that we would hope to inhabit and finding life already there. This goes in tandem with a common bylaw of engineering. Never create something with the intent of harming others. And so even with the interests of protecting our own way of life, this article shows that respecting the negative organisms is a top priority, which is definitely a practice that goes hand in hand with the science and engineering bylaws. Coming down to costs, again, it's another instance of ensuring the readers know all the allocations needed, and is a typical addendum for engineering papers. And then coming up on the conclusion here, they did a really good job of kind of breaking everything down they had already mentioned into how it all factor in to a successful mission to populate another planet. And then, of course, they had a really concise references section here, and it was, of course, very indicative of scholarly articles and engineering articles both. That concludes my breakdown of an engineering article for you, and I hope you enjoyed it, and that concludes my presentation. Have a good day. Thanks.